Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Studio 78 podcast. I am your host, Nache from NacheSnow.com. Welcome. All right, I hope you guys really enjoyed last week's guest. A lot of shares and love, so I'm taking it that you did. So I'm glad that you all found her episode to be very inspirational. And if you have any questions about any of the links that she mentioned, remember you can always go over to the show notes page, and hers was NacheSnow.com/97. Today, I also have another amazing guest for episode 98, and same thing, to get any of the links that she's mentioned today, just head on over to NacheSnow.com/98. Before I get into Eileen's episode, just a couple of things. One, before I take a little holiday break for Christmas and New Year's, know that we only have 2 more episodes left. I know. But don't worry, I will be back in January. So if you guys have any ideas for guests or creative folks that you would love to have on the podcast, please shoot me an email at hello@NacheSnow.com or just DM me on Instagram at NacheSnow. All right. Also, please, if you haven't already, please go over to iTunes and rate me 5 stars. It really helps people find the show. If you are not an Apple person and you're listening to this on YouTube, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, all the things, please rate me. Give me a thumbs up or whatever their rating system is. It really, really helps people find the show. All right. And also, it's the holidays, people. So please support your small businesses, including me. Head on over to thelifecleanse.co. That's my little store. It helps support the podcast and helps me do all kinds of things. So you can go over there and you can get my course. You can get some mugs. You can get my journal, the Life Cleanse journal, which makes an awesome gift. But please show some small business love by going over there. And that's thelifecleanse.co. Okay. So let's get into today's guest, Eileen. And funny enough, actually, Eileen, who has a book out called Creative Exploration, a 6-week process for introducing regular creativity into your life. Her book was edited by Kathy Cornwell, who was also on the podcast. So definitely after you listen to this, check out Kathy's episode 86. But I really wanted to have Eileen on here because oftentimes, you guys know, I dabble in a little bit of everything. I am definitely in 2020 going into mosaic art. I just took a workshop on it. I love it, and it is going to be a thing. Okay. If you follow me on Instagram, you already know this or Facebook, you know this. But I mean, I've dabbled in everything. Like this year, I was really into punch needles. Years past, I was into jewelry making, and I'm still into laser cutting. I just need to get a laser cutter, which is my goal for 2020, raise sales in order to get that. But, you know, I'm always into something creative, and people are always like, Nache, it's because you're a creative person. I'm just not that creative. But I promise you, people, practice makes perfect. If you really want to be good at something, you just do it every day, even if it's only 10, 15 minutes every day. Practice your calligraphy, practice your hand lettering, practice your watercolor. And so what I like about Eileen is she's kind of proof of never letting go of a dream to be creative. And she kind of walks us through how initially she was like, went into traditional graphic design. But then after having her kids, she was like, you know what? I think I want to get back into this. So I won't spoil the episode too much, but I like her process. And I like that once she found her creative juice, that she began to share with others how they can learn how to, for example, watercolor. Even if you think you don't have a creative bone in your body, by following her simple tutorials, you can get good, right? And just by learning the basics. So this episode is all about, to me, self-discovery, just embracing like your talents, not comparing yourselves to others, and then just like committing to doing something that you're passionate about, even if you're not necessarily good at first, right? And so I hope you guys enjoy this episode as she walks us through all the things. She also has some courses out. And so towards like the middle end of this episode, she talks about her process for creating courses, which is a very simple process. Because that's another thing people ask me about, like, oh my God, do you have to hire a videographer, and how complicated is it to create a course? And actually, it's not that complicated. As long as your meat is good, you could use your, I won't even get into it. She's going to talk about it, but trust me, like, you can do this. It's just about doing it, putting it out in the world, and marketing it. All right. But anywho, I will be quiet now. Let's get into Eileen's episode. Hello, Eileen. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Nache. I'm so thrilled to be here. Longtime listener, so to be on the other side is a thrill.
Yes. Well, I saw your work. I'm like, oh my goodness, I need to have her on the podcast and find out what her story is, and have you share how you created your book and all of that good stuff. But before I get into that, can you tell the listeners just a little bit about you and your background?
I am a mom of 3 teenagers and a wife. I live in New York by the beach, and my background is in graphic design. I've been a graphic designer for print and web, and now for email for 25 years.
And so how did you first get into graphic design? Were you kind of like an artsy kid, or once you got into school, you were like, this looks interesting?
I definitely was an artsy kid, and I sat in high school and I said, I'm going to major in art. And the confidence in myself just wasn't there. So I ended up going to school and studying business. And senior year, I had already taken every elective in the business department. So I took an art class. And as soon as I took the art class, I thought, I've made a mistake. And I asked the art teacher, actually, how do I get into, I don't even know at the time if I knew the word graphic design, but I asked her, how do you get into designing ads? And she showed me communication arts, which is like a collection of, beautiful award-winning work. And she said, oh, you need a portfolio that looks like this. And that totally intimidated me. I mean, I didn't know even what Photoshop was or anything. So I said to myself, well, I live in New York. I can work at an ad agency. And if I'm in a creative environment, that will be enough. But as soon as I got there and looked down the hall at the woman in the art room, I was like, I need to be in there. And luckily, working in New York City, there were all these schools around me where I could start taking classes, and that's how I got into graphic design.
Now, did you, after you graduated school, did you start with start working at a corporation doing design, or did you veer off and do something else? How did you start to kind of develop your design skills even further after school?
Well, as I was taking classes at that point, I was working full time. So every time I went to a new company, I got a job that was more creative. So first I was an assistant where I also would design the newsletter and help with, presentations. And then the job after that was for an investment bank, and I was, my title was graphic designer, which was a thrilling moment. And, the work wasn't that creative because I was designing like charts and fun reports, stuff like that. And then from there, I went to a smaller agency, and the work was a little bit more diverse, not as many charts and things like that. So I kind of as I was taking classes, I sort of worked myself into a more creative role.
And so at what point, did you decide to go back to like art?
Well, I remember the last design agency I worked at, we did a lot of logo design, logos for like events. And I always felt a little insecure about the logos because I felt like it would have been helpful if I could draw. And I didn't feel confident in my drawing at all. So then I had my kids. And next thing I knew, I'm home with 3 small kids and freelancing on the side, designing custom invitations, which I thought was my creative outlet. And so I was designing the invitations. And then after a couple of years, I realized I wanted to do something just for me, that this wasn't, the outlet any longer. And that's when I signed up for the first drawing class.
And then for your first drawing class, was it kind of just like a traditional drawing class, not where you're getting into watercolor, oils, or paints or anything like that, but where you were just learning like the fundamentals of like drawing people or drawing objects?
Right. It was, you start with, pencil, like regular pencils. And from there, we started using colored pencils. I remember early on, I drew a brown bear with colored pencils, actually Crayolas that were my kids' colored pencils. And it was like the first thing I had drawn that I was like, oh my God, I made this. And I was like a little kid. I came home and I showed my husband Neil and I said, I held it up. And he said, did you draw that? And I was like, I did. And then after that, class, when that ended, I took a watercolor class.
I love watercolor. Yeah.
Me too.
So then there was like, there's this bug, right? Like, it's like, oh my God, like once you start like drawing and painting, you're like, I want to do more. I want to learn more. So did you find that your nights and weekends were kind of like filled now with practicing?
Not really. I took classes for a couple of years, and here or there I would do a little bit at home, but mostly I only did the work in the class. And that's where I started to feel like I wanted to do more. And sometimes I felt like I worked on projects because they worked in the class environment, like it wasn't maybe something I would have picked if I was at home. And that's when I felt like I had, I wanted to explore more than the classes were letting me. Not that they were necessarily holding me back. It was more the way I felt. And I wanted to do it regularly. Like I would be drawing a little bit during the semester, but then when the class ended or there was no class over summer and so it was like, I remember for a couple of years, I would ask for Christmas for a new sketchbook. And, I would draw in it that first day and I'd be like, this will be the year. I will draw every day. And
yeah, I think we all like do that, right? Like we promise ourselves we're going to do something for the new year.
Right. Well, that's how my blog started, because eventually after a couple of years of trying to make that commitment, I was like, I want to do this. And I started, like a few days before New Year's, and I got on WordPress, started the blog, called it My Creative Resolution. and said, I'm going to draw and paint or whatever else, refinish furniture. I'm just going to figure out what I want to do. And I was beyond excited about what that could be.
So, a question for you, because, for people out there who are like, yes, I should start a blog too, just to kind of keep me on task, or force me to make sure that I'm doing something once a week, or once a month, whatever it might be. How did you kind of stay motivated? Because, you start this blog up, you're like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to post my work. But sometimes people kind of fizzle out a little bit, right? They're posting once a week, and then once a week becomes once a month, and once a month comes every 6 months. So were you able to kind of stick with creating content for your blog on a regular basis?
I did stick with it, but I realized I had to internally make some huge changes because when I started, I was looking at projects I had done and ideas, and I realized I had all these unfinished projects. Mm-hmm. And before we started recording, we talked about the excitement of starting a new project. I was great at that. I have an idea. I'm going to do a painting. I'm going to, whatever it is. And then when it started to get a little hard, I would famously give up. And so the blog, I would post something and I would say, okay, I'm working on this painting. And I would kind of show it in progress. And then even if nobody was reading it, I felt like I have to finish this. I can't just now move on to the next painting or whatever the next project is. So surprisingly, I started with acrylic painting and pulling out all these canvases that I had started and finishing them. And the satisfaction of actually finishing it just propelled me forward. And I also learned the lesson that every project has that moment where it gets hard. Mm-hmm. But if you push through it and you stick with it, you figure it out. And then it's just so satisfying.
And so the blog kind of helped keep you accountable. And I love that too, that you're like, I don't care if it's one person or, 100 people looking at this. To you, it's okay, I put it out there, so I'm going to make sure that whoever, at least I will see the finished product, and I can kind of go back, in time to see how I've made progress. That's
right,
great.
Exactly.
And then how did that evolve? Because, I remember going to your site and seeing where you're doing online video lessons. So you've come a long way from just oh, this is me learning how to do this, to hey, let me teach you how to create this birch forest painting. Yeah,
it really, and it's so awesome to have it all documented, because I started out, I didn't even know what I was going to be working on. I seriously thought I was going to become a furniture refinisher. I barely did one coffee table. So when I started, I was drawing in pencil in a sketchbook, and I was pulling out all these acrylic canvases. And I started this weekly checklist. I'm going to sketch every day for a couple of minutes, and then I'll work on one project a week. And at a certain point, I was getting a little bored with the pencil and the sketchbook. And I was like, I think I'm going to pull out my watercolor paints, which I hadn't really touched in a while. And I felt like once I pulled them out, it was like, oh my God, I forgot how much I loved watercolor. And then that started me down a whole path with really, I don't think I've ever left that phase of painting with watercolor.
Yeah. There's something special about watercolor. I've painted with, acrylic and oil before, and I'm not a great painter at all. Not to your level, my husband is, but not me. But there's something about, I don't know, watercolor to me that's special. It's the looseness of it. It's like, to me, very forgiving. And I don't know, I just love like when just how watercolor falls onto a paper. So I can totally get what you're saying is like, once you pick it up, you're just like, ooh, what can I create now? Right.
Because I think watercolor has like a magical element to it where it does some of the work for you.
Yeah.
As long as you can feel comfortable going with that. I think some people don't like not having the control. But I feel like you just kind of slap it on there and see where it leads you.
And just go with it. Yeah. And I think maybe because I'm like very abstract, like I'm okay if things run into each other. I'm okay if the colors mix and create new colors.
Right.
You know, even though it's funny because with my husband, when he does it, he does like a very dry watercolor because he likes things to be very precise. Whereas I like the more loose watercolor. So you can, you know, I guess have control if you really, really want it. But, I just like it when it's a little bit looser and it kind of does its own thing.
Actually, the watercolor teacher I had, this woman named Eva, I had painted a picture of my daughter, and I was really happy that it actually looked like a girl. And I showed it to her, and she was like, no. And I was like, I was so surprised. And she said, you're drawing. You need to paint. And I don't know if I understood at that moment what she was saying, but I think what she was trying to say was embrace watercolor and how loose it is. You know, don't try to control it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so, wow, for you, so you've, you know, even though you were trained in design and you're doing design, you learn how to draw and you start to learn how to paint. You create this blog, and at some point, you know, you decide to create a book, right? And do these videos. So how did you get there from just like, you know, just learning how to do this to like, you know what, I want to inspire others to do this creative thing that I've learned how to do?
I think in a way it happened slowly because when I first started blogging, I felt I was a little nervous about putting myself out there, but I found that the creative people on WordPress were very encouraging. And kind of cheered me on. And, you know, some of them followed me for a long time, so they saw my progress. And then there was like a point where all of a sudden there were new people and they didn't know where I had started from. So they were like all of a sudden looking to me as if I was like the expert. And it was kind of like a funny thing because I was like, now I was giving other people advice and cheering them on. And I knew what it was like to be just starting out. The idea for the book, I think was an idea I think I had for years that I kind of kept coming back around to. And, you know, I would spend a lot of time working on it in one form or another, and then I would put it aside and kind of forget about it. And then the idea, you know, it could be a year later, the idea would sort of come up again. And when it came up this time, I was like, okay, now I need to see this idea through. And I actually hired an editor, Kathy Cromwell, that you know, because I felt like if I put her in place, that will help me when I start to lose motivation.
And it becomes real, right? Because now somebody's depending on you to give them content, right? Like you're like you've committed to this, right?
Right, exactly. And it worked. Once I hired her, you know, then it helped it go on for a lot longer than you know, I would have let the project sort of fade into the background. The video thing, I've had not a lot, but I've had some posts that teach people how to do certain things. Like the birch painting was initially a post I had done like 2 years ago. And for whatever reason, through Pinterest, it was like 20,000 people viewed it. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. I had a library contact me. Can we use this project at our library?
Oh, wow.
I had people tag me on Instagram like, oh, look, I made this. And so, for a long time, I thought about, I would love to do more of a video course or a video lesson. Mm-hmm. So literally that lesson launched earlier this week.
Well, and I think right now, more and more people are looking for easy ways to, from home in some cases, sometimes people like actually taking in-person courses, but they're looking for a way to be more creative. And I think like a video like yours is a perfect way, right? They can order the supplies from wherever and then just play and pause the video as they need to and really learn how to, in how many ever minutes, like create a forest, right? And then they all of a sudden they're like, oh my goodness, I could do this. I didn't even think I could paint. But by watching her video, like I've created my own piece of art, which is pretty cool.
What I love about that lesson in particular is that you practice so many watercolor techniques. So you're kind of learning as you're doing a specific painting that then you could go on and play with watercolor on your own.
Yeah, because once you get the basic techniques down, then it's sort of easy to apply it to other things, and then the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it.
Right.
And what I love too is, and it's so funny, and that's why I always tell people, just like put your stuff out there. Like when you created that birch forest painting video, which I'll definitely link to in the show notes, you didn't think like, oh, like 20,000 people are going to like see this online, right? It's always the things where you're just like, oh, I'm just creating this. Hopefully it'll help like 2 people. And then you just never know who forwards it on and then how many people that it can end up helping.
I have another post too that's a seascape painting, and both of them you can on my Etsy shop, you can download a PDF so that you have the notes and the steps in front of you. This is, it's still there, but this is before I started going in the video course direction. So a woman bought one of them, and we ended up communicating through Etsy a little bit, and she mentioned that she had MS, that she was excited to do the project. And so when I launched the video course earlier this week, I sent her a note and told her that I was wondering if she would like for free to see the video course, because, then I could get some feedback from her, see what she thought. Is it confusing or anything like that? And she said to me that I came around at exactly the right moment, that because of her MS, she was now having mobility issues and she could no longer go out to her art class. And I was so touched, it's just amazing that, like you're saying, you can touch people that are at home, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it's making it, knowledge more accessible for people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's great. And, so with your book, like, once you got Kathy involved and you were committed to doing it, and then you got published, like one thing we were talking offline about is as creatives, right? We love, and I'm guilty of this too. We're like, okay, we created this thing. Here it is, people, and I'm out. Next thing.
Right.
Do you think that, have you done like a good job at like marketing it, or are you still kind of like in that phase where you're trying to figure out how to get to more people? But, I'm just curious, like, what are some of the things that you've done to try to like, have your book, get out there in the world?
I definitely am still in the trying to promote it phase, trying to think of ways to promote it. obviously talking to you today. I also am going to be a guest blog post writer on a blog about it's retirees, because I think it's something that if you're struggling to look for a hobby, or the process in the book can help with that, help you find what your thing is. I created some little videos on Pinterest. I feel like I'm very comfortable trying to put stuff out online, but when it comes to like personally talking about it, that's something that I feel like I need to work on. And I'm glad that it's something that I love to talk about. Like, it's like something I believe in, that anyone can be creative. I just went out with high school friends, and it was funny because from Facebook, they're all like, "You wrote a book. What's the book about?" It's just, so I feel like just talking about it, and then the next day someone texted me from the dinner and said, "I bought your book."
Right. I mean, really, it's just putting it out there, right? And which is like the hardest part for a creative, I think, sometimes. But I feel like the more I talk about it or put it out there or go out to events, then the more sales I get. And if I don't do anything, then of course there aren't going to be any sales. So it's just like, oh yeah, I gotta tell people about this thing.
Exactly. And I've always, Instagram, a lot of the followers might not be people I know personally, whereas Facebook is more people I know personally. And it was funny because I was out to lunch, literally, I think the day that the book was published, and I mentioned it to my friend, and she said, "I didn't see anything on Facebook. I didn't know you published a book." And I thought, that's because I didn't put it there. It's like I have to get over the, again, it's a confidence thing, going back to high school where I was intimidated to major in art. So it's kind of the same thing. Even when I started the blog, I did it completely anonymously. Like, I was putting myself out there. I didn't tell anybody I knew. And as I started posting, my confidence started to build. And then I was like, "Oh, my name's Eileen," and, little things.
Right. But good for you for putting it out there. Like, because sometimes people talk to me and they're like, "Oh, Nache, I just don't know, like, how you just put stuff out there." But I always tell people, I'm like, what's the worst that can happen, right? Like, maybe I start a thing and it doesn't do too well, but I'm like, it's never the end of the world, right? Like, I'm just going to go ahead and put myself out there, and people are going to see the failures and they're going to see the wins. And, it's like, I feel like the more you do it, the more comfortable you end up getting with it. So now I just put everything out there.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. And then you have the confidence to do the video course or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
I think it just builds on each thing.
Mm-hmm. And so have you, I think like it's great like that, you did the video course and you have like PDFs, and I think even your book comes in PDF form, or you can get the physical book, so you're making it accessible for people. How did you do the video? Like, had you kind of dabbled in video before? Did you pay somebody to help you to create your video lesson?
One of the reasons I was hesitant about video is because I didn't want it to be like a video of me. Mm-hmm. So for a long time, I think I struggled with like, will it be my voice and me, and how would I do this? And will it be this like continuous video I'm just painting? Because like, what if I'm painting the sample and then something doesn't go right? And, how do I exactly do that? I was actually kind of inspired by Jenna Kutcher.
Oh, yeah.
She has the Gold Digger podcast.
Yeah, I love her podcast. And
she talked a lot about her courses and how they're set up. And she uses slides. And I started to think maybe that would be a good format. So what I did was, for this birch painting, lesson, it's broken down into 10 steps. So first, there's a slide that explains what the step is. And there's a voiceover where I'm essentially reading the slide and explaining it a little bit more in depth. And then the next slide is you watch the video of that step. So it's not this one continuous video. You can really break it down into parts. Like, this is the part where she's putting salt on the watercolor, or she's pulling up the tape that was masking for the trees, or so that's the format. That's how I did it. I did it in Keynote, and you can record right over Keynote, right in Keynote. I just took the videos on my iPhone and edited them it's an Adobe app, I think. I forget what it's called. Maybe Premiere.
Oh, yeah.
So I sped things up or sort of phased things out, and then kind of put it all together and exported it from Keynote.
I love that. And I'm glad you said that, because I think sometimes people think creating in class has to be very complicated, and it really doesn't. Like,
right.
I mean, literally it can be slides, videos from your phone, and just, really having like a structure to your course, and, and just having those elements, it can be done very well and be very useful to like your customer set. You don't have to have this full production, pay somebody to do like the videos for you. And, and if you're uncomfortable with having your face in video, like, I'm like, you don't have to have your face in video, because really people are just trying to, especially with something like this, they want to actually see you doing the thing. So
right.
I'm glad you just explained that. So if there's somebody out there who's like been kind of using the excuse of like, I don't know, or I don't want to be on video, they see like, no, you can actually do it without, spending a lot of money or putting your face on video.
Right. And I think it's good. I felt like once I had the format, now I can apply it to other lessons, even more complicated lessons. But I felt like getting down the format was like a big milestone.
So how do you stay organized? So you're running a graphic design business, you're, promoting your book and doing videos. Like, how do you just stay sane?
I'm a big write things by hand kind of person. I find a lot of mentally, I feel like that's the best way for me to stay organized. So every morning I have a notebook. I write in my notebook. Occasionally I'll flick back to see, are there ideas I forgot about? And it just kind of helps me stay focused, especially in those times where a project is like towards the end, but maybe it's getting to the hard part, and it just kind of reaffirms, okay, this is what I need to spend my time on. And occasionally, like we talked about with having a million creative ideas, occasionally I just need to like empty all the ideas into my notebook and say like, okay, what are all the things that I'm thinking about? And then look at them and prioritize. I actually created a worksheet that is in the book, and also you could download on Etsy, but it's really based on the book Eat the Frog. Have you ever heard of that book?
Oh my God, that's so funny. You're the first person who said that, because I tell people Eat the Frog all the time, and they're like, what are you talking about? You're crazy. So yes, I've heard of that book.
So the worksheet is basically what they recommend in the book, which is dump down all your ideas and then look at the ideas and give them a letter value, like A, B, C, A, B, C, D. You can have multiple A's or multiple B's. So you prioritize your list, and then you look at the A's and you number the A's. And then you write the A's in numerical order. And then I would take, say, the top A's and I would say, okay, what are the next steps to move this project forward? Mm-hmm. And whether it's, say, for the video course, okay, write the script, record it. And then maybe it's been trying to load pilgrim watercolor art onto Etsy. Okay, retouch the pilgrims. So I find something like that helpful. But, I don't always have to do the entire worksheet. It's kind of like occasionally I do the worksheet and then I just carry through on that. And I find looking through the notebook helpful because literally I'll forget about ideas. Actually, it's one of the things that helped propel me forward with the book is because when I look back to my notebook, I found it was like almost yearly that I was circling back on the book idea, inspiring creativity in other people.
No, I love it. And if I remember correctly, too, with the Eat the Frog, because I tell people like that all the time when I'm talking to them is the key, too, is like, once you make your list, right, you do the thing you don't want to do first. So you get it out the way.
Right. You eat the frog. You literally eat the frog.
You literally eat the frog.
Yes.
And I can tell you people, this is the truth, because if you don't eat the frog, then you're going to do all those other little things. And by the end of the day, if you haven't done the thing that you were dreading, like it's either you're going to wait to the next day, you're going to procrastinate, or you're not going to do it well because you just didn't get it out the way, or your whole day will kind of be ruined because in the back of your head, you're like, oh my God, I still have to do X, right? So I always tell people in the morning, like, eat the frog, do that thing that you really don't want to do. And then the rest of your day is cake. So yeah,
and I think you're so much more motivated the rest of the day.
I agree.
I let weeks go by where on my list it was like, write the script, do the voiceover. And I knew why I wasn't doing the voiceover because I felt so intimidated by recording my voice and how was I going to do this? And then finally I just got to that point where I was like, I just got to do it. And it was so funny. It was the weekend and my husband was home and he comes into our room and he's like, why are you sitting in the closet? And I was trying to be in like, a soundproof area recording my slides. And then once I did it, it was so much easier to just finish the video and publicize it.
No, I mean, that's the way to do it. Because even like when I was creating my course, I was just like, But once I was like, okay, I have the outline. Like I just took a day and I was like, okay, Nache, you're going to record every single session and re-record and record and re-record. And then after that, it was like a weight was lifted off of me because I was like, okay, now I just need to edit it. Like the hard part is done. Recording it.
Right.
So yeah, I agree. Okay. And do you have a hobby or is, painting kind of like your hobby, which you've turned into a side hustle?
I saw that that's how you wrap up your podcast. And I thought about that question. Do I have a hobby? I guess I would say painting is my hobby because it's what I enjoy to do for no other purpose than that I enjoy doing it. Whether or not it goes anywhere. If I had another hobby, I would say going to the beach would be my hobby. I love the beach. That's a good
hobby. Yeah. And then please just tell the listeners where to find you. Any social media handles, your website, all of that good stuff.
My website is shop.eileenmckenna.com. And from there you can find the blog, which is mycreativeresolution.com. And my Instagram is @EileenMcKenna.
Perfect. Well, Eileen, I have enjoyed talking to you, and I'm sure you're going to inspire somebody to learn how to draw or do watercolor. So thank you for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been so much fun.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you head on over to nachesnow.com/98, I have the links to all of her tutorials, her main shop, her Etsy shop, all the things that she's mentioned, even some of the tools she used in order to create her courses. So if you're interested in any of those, they're on nachesnow.com/98. And my main takeaway, or the takeaway that it's my main takeaway, but I want you to also take it away, is just get started. Just commit to doing something and really commit. Don't just talk about it, do it. I think a lot of times what prevents us from doing anything, it could be something creative, it can be something daring with our careers, it could be an adventure, is the execution. Everybody is all talk and no one wants to actually do the thing that they need to do in order to get started. So I ask that you commit after listening to this episode to just do that thing that you've always wanted to do. Take that workshop, take that course, start a blog, start a YouTube channel, just do whatever it is and don't worry about what people think or if you'll be good at it at all. Just do it. All right. So please take that away. As I mentioned in the beginning, also please support the podcast. I can't talk today. Also support the podcast by going to thelifecleanse.co. All kind of goodies over there. And if you enjoyed this episode, please go over and rate the podcast 5 stars on iTunes or give it a thumbs up or rate it wherever you may be listening. All right. Have a beautiful week, folks. And I will be back next week with another amazing guest. Take care. Bye.